Moria will know greatness under my rule. I will be called Catar the Magnificent. History will remember my name, worshipping it even more than Alexander's." Ashoka looked around at his loyal guards. They would not let Catar get away with killing him. "What makes you think you'll live through the next few moments?" Ashoka asked calmly. Catar answered only with a grin. Horses emerged from the forest, but they did not belong to Ashoka's brother Vit. They were Catar's most loyal soldiers, double the number of his guards. They flanked Ashoka's men, who were now hopelessly outmatched. "I did not do this on a whim," Catar said. "I have been planning this for weeks, scouting out just the spot to ambush you and your men. When I return with your body, I will tell your subjects about how rebellious Kalingan traitors had cut you down. Who else will they turn to but your most trusted general, who has delivered this great but tragic victory for the Empire? My brother will avenge me. He will try, but he's just as weak as you are. If I can defeat you, he will prove no trouble at all." Catar turned to one of his soldiers, whom Ashoka recognized as a top cavalry officer. "You found them?" Catar asked. The officer nodded and took a satchel from his shoulder. He removed a scroll and held it over his head for all to see. "All 9, the officer said. Ashoka felt a chill at seeing one of the 9 sacred scrolls of knowledge, representing the collected intelligence of the best minds in his kingdom. The fact that the scrolls were here had to mean the librarian was dead, and now Catar had everything he needed to rule with absolute power. Catar turned back to Ashoka and smiled. "Maybe you now realize that I missed you on purpose before, to give time for my men to arrive. I was keeping you alive until I made sure the scrolls were in my hands. Since they are, you are no longer necessary. Your dynasty ends here. Now." Catar raised his sword for the killing blow as his soldiers charged toward the Imperial Guard. Ashoka wasn't going to make it easy for him. He crouched down and twisted to his side as the sword came down, striking his shoulder. The leather armor absorbed part of the blow, but the blade cut deeply into his muscle. Ignoring the pain, he stood to run, but Catar had the advantage of height and speed astride his horse. The general drew his sword back for another swing, a maniacal look of bloodlust in his eyes. Among the din of clashing swords, snorting horses, and screams of dying men, Ashoka heard the distinctive sound of an arrow whizzing by. It struck Catar's hand, and he cried out as he dropped the sword. With a look of fury, Catar wrenched the arrow from his palm and looked in the direction it had come from. Ashoka followed his gaze and saw Vit and his archers stampeding toward them, arrows flying from their bows. A quarter of Catar's men went down in the first volley. Seeing that his defeat was imminent, Catar wheeled his horse around and charged the cavalry officer holding the satchel. He snatched it away and yelled, "Make sure no one follows me!" Then he whipped his horse and galloped into the forest. Ashoka wasn't going to let him get away so easily, not with the scrolls of knowledge. As long as Catar had those, he would be a dire threat to Ashoka's plans for his country's new era. Ashoka leaped onto his horse and drew his sword with his uninjured arm. Despite his brother's calls to get to safety, he followed his betrayer. Catar was the better fighter, but Ashoka was a superior horseman. Instead of taking the clear path through forest where he could have used his horse's speed to escape, Catar was weaving through the thick stand of trees in an effort to lose any pursuers. But Ashoka wasn't fooled. He could spot Catar's trail of broken branches and trampled underbrush as he rode, taking whatever shortcuts he could to close the distance. Finally, he spotted the bright silver buckles on Catar's armor flickering in and out of view. Ashoka raced to the side and paralleled his course, drawing nearer with every moment. Catar realized he was being followed and drew his dagger. In desperation, he threw it at Ashoka, but it sank into a tree that came between them.